Yep.
sorts under collaborative management agreement or reconciliation program.
Okay, well that's good feedback too, I think makes sense. So this was our early thinking about how does everyone work together. What we're doing with this engagement strategy is recognizing that an advisory committee is only one of a couple ways that people can engage with this and provide input, because not everybody has the time or the energy to participate in an advisory committee, and there isn't room for everyone in every community to participate in an advisory committee. So how else do we provide opportunities for people to engage and provide input and stay up to date with what's happening? And that's where this diagram comes in. So in addition to that Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee, which you saw on the last slide, we're suggesting there's other ways that people can get involved, and I'll say a little bit about each of those now. So the Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee, or the IOAC, which is described on page 6 of that engagement strategy, this is that multi-sector advisory body that brings everyone together to have a conversation. Now, one of the challenges here is we know that we do want that group to be inclusive, but we also don't want it to be 250 people. So how do we find the balance between being inclusive and creating a group that is effective and builds relationships and can work efficiently together? So a couple of examples of what this kind of committee could do, just to help understand where it fits and what it does, are things like, this is a group that could provide input to the goals and the objectives of the planning process, and it can also play an important role in identifying what are the priority issues that a management plan should address. So in addition to that advisory committee, we also know that given there are going to be priority issues, we may want to create places where we can have a more detailed discussion about that priority issue with a group of people who have expertise or experience or a vested interest in that issue. And that could be a specific marine activity, or it could be about a specific place within PNCIMA. So if there's something that's specific to the Coola Valley, there are a couple of issues that are very closely linked together. Maybe you have a working group where those issues in this place are a topic of discussion. So things that a working group could do include, bringing together what is known about that issue, identifying the best available information, and then perhaps developing some advice or recommendations about how to address those issues. Membership is obviously going to depend on what's being discussed, but similar to that advisory committee or the IOAC, you'd want all of the different parties who have some role in that to be present in the working group. So now examples of possible topics, I already gave one about sort of the idea of something about the Coola area, but you could also have something about what are the implications of potential increases in shipping traffic along different parts of the coast. How might that affect other values in those areas or other resources? And what are the potential benefits or drawbacks for different communities? There are also all kinds of advisory processes that already exist that somehow address marine resources or something about the ocean. So we recognize we really need to link to those effectively. And that could include things like commercial fishery advisory boards or recreational fishery advisory boards, or an advisory process that's related to shipping and marine transportation, or finfish aquaculture. The list goes on and on. So our plan here, what we're proposing, is that where we're developing a recommendation or a proposal that has some relation to a commercial fishery or to aquaculture, that we take that proposal out to those advisory processes that deal with aquaculture or commercial fishery, and we invite their input, because they're sources of real experience and expertise on that subject, and we bring that input back into the PNCIMA planning process to inform how that recommendation gets developed. So each of those examples that I've just given, working groups, the Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee, and the other advisory processes. Those are all places where limited numbers of people come together to have discussions. So how do we also create opportunities for broader public input? Because not everybody can be on one of those committees. So to try and address that, we're suggesting there's a number of different things we could do. So we could do things like the PNCIMA forum that was held last March, where you get everyone together and have a big discussion with each other, a big discussion with the people who are leading and implementing the planning process. And that's an opportunity to both report out and also to invite questions and feedback. You can also develop, plan workshops on topics that are relevant to different places or specific to a topic or an activity, and then invite the public to participate in that. And those would be, instead of a working group which might meet repeatedly through time, a workshop would be 1 to 2 days where you really have a focused discussion about that, and it enables or allows for more people to attend. So an example is the workshop that I mentioned where we talked about socioeconomic and cultural information within PNCIMA. That's an acronym that captures that work on the socioeconomic stuff. So those are ways that we can get people together in a more public venue to talk about the planning process. And it also includes meetings like this one where we come out to communities and we're talking about specific subjects in specific places. On top of all that, we also know that the web is a way that people are getting a lot of their information, and it can also be a way that we can invite feedback and input, so that communication can be 2 ways. Communicating out, but also inviting feedback in. And there are different ways that we can use the web. It could be things like polls or surveys or online meetings or forums. All of those are possibilities. So one of the things we want to talk about with you here tonight is how do we make use of the web in a way that's going to work for your community? And if the web isn't the best way to communicate, what are the other options? We do have a website. It's a source of a lot of information already. So you can certainly draw on the work that's been done and sort of keep informed with what we're doing currently and what we're doing next by checking in there. So that's a quick and dirty overview. In terms of what happens once we're finished this meeting here tonight, we have one more meeting like this in Vancouver next week, and we've had a bunch on the island and on Hawaii and on the north coast as well. So we'll be taking everything we've heard out of all those meetings and basically revising that engagement strategy to reflect what people have been telling us about how to engage with them effectively. And then once we revise it, we're going to begin implementing pieces of it. And one of the first things we want to do is convene that Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee. We want to try and do that by June. And once we convene the committee, that's when we start the timer on a 2-year planning process, so that by the end of 2 years, in 2012, we want to have that draft plan, which can be submitted to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. So, this is an opportunity for you to provide feedback on this engagement strategy. You can also submit comments in writing or by email after this meeting. We're accepting comments until April 16th, and then we'll be trying to incorporate what we've heard. You can also, so there's the email address. You can mail it, or you can call, and we can have further discussions about this stuff. So that's all, and I think our plan now is to maybe, if people have questions about that, we can talk about them, but really, I think we want to jump into the discussion and sort of walk through the document and start getting the thoughts.
Okay. Would anybody like to just take a moment and grab a cup of tea or coffee or stretch your legs before we get into this next part?